Good morning, everybody. My name is Matt Kolberg. Welcome to the Collaboration for Civil webinar with SolidCAD. I'm here with Jerry James and Steve Ma. I'll just make sure I unmute everybody.
Perfect. Yes. I wanted to thank everyone on joining today's call. My name is Steve Ma. I am the Industry Account Manager here in Alberta. And today's webinar, we have two technicians on the line. We have Matt Kolberg and Jerry James. And today's topic will be collaboration for civil with BIM 360 design. As we all know, BIM 360 is the new wave that's coming over, and kind of facilitating better collaboration between projects. And Matt and Jerry will talk about sort of the tools and tips and tricks that will make our lives a lot easier and increase our efficiencies when we're working. So if you do have any questions, please feel free to add them to the chat, and then we'll leave a lot of the questions till the end of the webinar, and we'll have Matt and Jerry sort of answer what questions come forward. So with that, I'll hand the webinar over to Matt and Jerry, and they'll start.
Thank you, Steve. So yeah, ask your questions in the Q&A panel. You probably don't have a chat panel. And so the Q&A panel is where you're going to go to ask questions. And what we'll do is Steve or maybe Jerry, if they can answer the question in the Q&A, please maybe have a look at that. Otherwise, I'll probably stop once in a while and see if there's any outstanding questions, or maybe we'll just answer them at the very end if there's none. All right, so it's going to be some PowerPoint, it's going to be some Civil 3D, and it's going to be some internet, BIM 360 online. So the first thing I want to talk about really is what all this stuff is. And so my first slide here is just definitions of the various pieces that you're going to need to run this. And so what is BIM really? It's an intelligent 3D model-based process that gives architecture, engineering, and construction professionals the insight. Basically what this all means is BIM is building information modeling, and it's a system of techniques and software that you use to essentially get a project completed. BIM 360 Docs, at its core, it really is a place where you store your design files. Now, it's online, it's in the cloud. Normally, not normally, but historically, engineers, consultants keep your files on, let's say, a T drive, a server drive, right? You have a physical server in your office or maybe in another city geographically, and that's where your files are stored. We can use them because Civil 3D users connect to your server and you can open files that way. But it becomes more difficult to collaborate with, let's say, outside individuals on that project because the files live on your server, and if you're not part of your domain, then nobody else can have access. And so BIM 360 Docs is Autodesk's cloud solution for the storage, retrieval, and collaboration, amongst other things, of all of your documents, not just DWGs, but you can place all of your documents here. BIM 360 Design is a piece of the puzzle, typically when it comes to Civil 3D. BIM 360 Docs itself allows you to upload and download files and store them in the cloud. BIM 360 Design is really sort of a plugin, not really a plugin, more like a subscription advantage, right? You have to purchase BIM 360 Design. It gives you some functionality that BIM 360 Docs just doesn't. And the exact functionality, I can just open up this link right here. The exact functionality is spelled out in this document. So if you want to check this out yourself, really just do a Google search for this, and it should be like the first thing you see. And there's a matrix down here that says what you can do with BIM 360 docs and what you can do when you have BIM 360 design for collaboration. Some people call it C4C, collaboration for civil. And really it's focused on data shortcuts. If you use data shortcuts and data references in Civil 3D, and you should in all likelihood, you pretty much need this tool if you're going to work with BIM 360 docs. The desktop connector is a plugin that gets installed on all the users' machines. This one's free. This one doesn't cost you anything. It's there to connect BIM 360 docs in the cloud with your computer. It handles synchronizing files. It handles uploading files. It handles file locking. It works sort of separate from Civil 3D, but it also works inside Civil 3D. Really, it creates for you connected drives. So here's my File Explorer in Windows. I'm going to open up BIM 360 here. These are all the different accounts I have, and these are the projects within this particular account. And so it shows up essentially as not a new drive letter, but a new place on your computer where project files are stored. So that's what the desktop connector is. It facilitates the synchronization of files between the cloud and your computer. If you've ever used Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive or Box or any of those services that allow you to store files on your computer while synchronizing with the cloud, it's a very similar thing to that, except this is an Autodesk tool. It has to be run or has to be installed to use this. Now, not a word of caution, but the desktop connector is updated pretty much every month as far as I can remember in the last 6-8 months or so. And so if you start using BIM 360 docs with the desktop connector, you should get a notification when a new version of the connector is made available. Now, if you minimize that notification or if you don't see it, it may not come around again. So I would advise that you check periodically with the desktop connector to see if there is a new update, because very important tools or functionality is released every time a new version of desktop connector is released. I'll give you an example. It was only, I think, last month, September, I believe, maybe August, where we had the ability to synchronize sheet-set DST files. And so if you use sheet-set DST files in July, you wouldn't have been able to synchronize them, but in September you could. But if you didn't install the connector, then you wouldn't be able to do that. So definitely always use the latest desktop connector. File replication, just like OneDrive or Google Docs, or sorry, Google Drive, files show up in the cloud and they also show up on your computer. Let me show you something. Now, here is my drive on my computer. These 3 files I have uploaded to the cloud, and I can see that they're actually synchronized on my machine. They actually exist on my machine because I see this. They're called synced, right? So I'm using up 2.5, about 2.5 megabytes of space on my hard drive. You can imagine that your project is going to be far larger than this, and it might be a couple hundred megs or even a gigabytes worth of files. And you might think, okay, well, that's a lot of information I have to store on my computer, because we all have probably small-ish SSD drives, and maybe they're just not big enough to hold all this project data. Well, you know what? They don't have to be. Because what I can do is I can free up space. What happens is those files are now only online. It appears that they take up space on my hard drive, but they actually don't. The folder structure is sort of replicated, and the files, we can see that files exist, but they're actually not on my hard drive. They're taking up no space at all right now. Only when I synchronize them locally, or when I open them, do they ever take up space. So I'm going to synchronize that folder. The bottom right of my screen, it's transferring the files. Depending on your internet speed and the size of the files, it might take a few seconds, it might take a few minutes. And now the files actually exist on my machine. So no worries about loading up your hard drive necessarily. If you have a massive project and you download and synchronize all the files, well, yeah, they're going to take up space on your machine. But you can manage that. All right. We are going to get into Civil 3D. Don't worry. I just got to go through a couple of prerequisites here. Number one of these things you have to do if you want to run Collaboration for Civil or BIM 360 design. You have to obtain a BIM 360 Docs account. Right? You can do that with Steve. Steve is our host today, our SolidCAD Western Sales Manager. You have to obtain a BIM 360 design license. Now, you need this if you're going to be running with Civil 3D and data shortcuts. If you're not going to be using data shortcuts, you can just have the Docs account. But most Civil 3D users use data shortcuts, and pretty much you're going to need that BIM 360 design license if you're going to do anything with it. You have to have Civil 3D 2020.2 update or later installed. This tool, the BIM 360 design tool, Collaboration for Civil, only came out almost exactly a year ago, about November, I think, last year. That's when 2020.2 was released. I don't know if you tried it out back then. I know I did. You know, when the second it was released, I was pretty excited about it. Okay, this is some new, pretty cool stuff, and it was very, very slow. You know, I don't know if you saw Autodesk's original webinar for this. I've never heard the words "be patient" spoken so often, but that has completely changed since then. So if your only exposure to this tool was last November, and it was very slow, you need to rethink it. It is far faster now. It is basically completely usable now. As of April, it's pretty much been, I can't say perfect, nothing's perfect, but it's very, very much faster. I don't have to wait minutes or tens of minutes for anything to happen. It is very quick now. You have to install the latest Autodesk desktop connector. Then you log into BIM 360 online. You have to create a project. You have to assign services to those projects, and you have to create users and assign roles and permissions to that project. Now, today, I'm not going to go into much detail about doing that online. That would add probably another hour to a webinar, let's say. I'm going to focus on sort of the BIM 360 design, the Civil 3D workflow. But that's what you need to do before you can start any project. So let me see. I think I've got it all loaded up here somewhere. There we are. Close my other tabs. This is what my project looks like online. That's my account up in the top left of my screen, and that's my project. I have access to multiple accounts here. You will probably have access to one account, maybe more if you need it, but you're going to have multiple projects. And so if I need to switch to a different project, I can. I click here and I just choose a different project. When you create a project, you can upload, you know, an image like I have here, and you can decide various other decisions for that project. When you have a project, you have a couple of, well, let's call them folders, I see. There's a plans folder and there's a project files folder. The plans folder, that's where you upload your, not transmittals, but, well, you're issued for approval plans, you're issued for construction, your addendums, you're issued for record drawings, whatever. You create a bunch of PDFs, let's say, and you upload it to that folder. This is essentially your digital copy. And so I've done that already, and I'll just show you here. This began its life as a single PDF file with 13 pages in it. What BIM 360 Docs does is it splits them up into individual sheets. You might think, well, why does it do that? Well, because each sheet potentially has certain tasks that it needs to accomplish. Let's say, for example, you issue a set, and by the way, I've got a set defined called initial submissions. Maybe you've created a set called issue for construction. So it'll say issue for construction in version 1. Then maybe on Tuesday you realize something changed and you have to issue an addendum. Well, that's not a whole new set. You're just going to update, let's say, the cover sheet because there was a mistake on it. So we don't have to issue a whole new set just to cover the change that's made on that one sheet. So it's a new sheet that's going to be replacing this one. It's going to exist in the same set, but that one will be version 2. And then over here, I'm not going to talk much about this either, but you can very easily mark up files online. You can create an issue online, and you can create something called request for information online. And you can invite anybody to your project that you want. Contractor or your customer. You, as a BIM 360 admin person, can add people. And you can give them various permissions. And so typically what you'll do is you'll give those people permissions to this plans folder, and they can open the plans and they can mark up and they can do a request for information or create issues. Your design files live in the project files folder. And these are just some folders I made up. You can replicate or duplicate your own internal company folder standard here if you wish. Shortcuts, that is Civil 3D data shortcuts, and of course I can't do that without BIM 360 Design. This is certainly not a big project, so I only have a few files here in the design files. This is where they live in the cloud, and I already showed you where they live on my computer. So let's go back to the PowerPoint just for a second. So this is pretty much the last slide, I believe. Yes, it is. Let's go back. Project user administration, we've sort of already covered that. File replication via connected drives. Well, we talked about that a little bit, but let's talk a little bit more. The software understands the relationships between your drawing files, external references, data references or shortcuts, sheet set DST files, MMS files. I don't have that listed here, but when you have a big surface that requires an MMS file, that's BIM 360 understands the relationship between your drawing and that file. And even if your drawing uses the new Civil 3D, it's not even new anymore, the Civil 3D reference template feature, these file types, BIM 360 understands the relationships. So what does this mean? Well, if I were going to upload a drawing that had an XREF, so for example, let's say the blue file is XREF'd into the red file, and I just upload the red file to BIM 360, the desktop connector understands the relationships. And so it'll automatically take that file and upload it as well. All right, let's see if I can make that happen. I've got a couple of files here, rectangle and circle. What I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the desktop connector pending actions tool so you can see it. This pending actions tool shows you what happens sort of under the hood. And I will take the rectangle file only. I'll drag it and drop it into my BIM 360 folder locally. You notice I do not have to do this online. I can just do it locally. So the bottom right of my screen, it says it's transferring files. You're going to see the rectangle file in there, and you'll see the circle file in there automatically. This guy here, pending actions, says, nope, I'm doing this. This is what we're doing. We're uploading files. They're new, they're synchronized, whatever it says, and now it's done. And all I did was drag the rectangle file over. The desktop connector automatically grabbed that circle file because it's an XREF. It understands the relationship. If it was a data reference like Civil 3D Data Shortcut, it's going to do the same thing. So that's what I mean when I say that BIM 360 understands the relationships between the files. Free up local hard drive space, we talked about that. And so let's talk about your typical Civil 3D workflows. Opening files, saving, closing files. That's all going to be covered here under file locking. So let me grab Civil 3D here for a second. There we go. This is what Civil 3D looks like now. 2021, 2020, pretty much the same thing. We have this here. Now, where am I? I'm in the Start tab. And so BIM 360 is a new sort of area that we can go to. We have access to all of our BIM 360 project information. I can switch accounts here. I can switch projects here. Right? I've got the circle drawing. I've got the rectangle drawing. Those are already in here already. Tells me who the author is. It even tells me which files have references. So for example, the rectangle XREFs the circle drawing into it. Therefore, it has a reference. The alignment drawing contains a surface that is referenced from the survey drawing. And so that's why the alignment drawing has a reference. That could be important. Here I'm on version 7 of the alignment drawing as well. So we've got a lot of information that we can show about our files, and there's actually even more. When I click the settings button, I can turn on lots of different kinds of information. When the file was locked, the data references refresh tool. So Jerry, you there?
I am here.
Cool.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Thank you.
Excellent.
Do you have Civil 3D open?
I do.
Would you mind, please, opening the, let's see. Let's get you to open the alignment drawing.
Okay.
Can we share your screen?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Hang on. Just gotta.
I may have to stop sharing mine. I'll let you try first.
I think it'll. I think I can Shanghai it from you.
You can. Looks good.
Yeah. All right.
Now, notice that Jerry does not have the circle or the rectangle. You may have to hit the refresh button up to the top right there. If it's been synchronized to your machine yet, right? It takes time.
There it goes.
There, it's done. Right? It takes time for it to go from my machine to the cloud and then to Jerry's machine. But it really doesn't take a heck of a lot of time. All right, so you see the author, says me. Go ahead and open the alignment file. Once it's open, I'm just going to get you to save it just for fun.
Okay. Once it's open.
Yeah. So what it's doing is checking for the latest version just to make sure Jerry has the latest version. It's checking to see if it has references that have not been synchronized. And it will synchronize them if it needs to, or at least it should.
Yep.
So not a huge drawing, but you know, it gets the point across. All right, so just let me zoom in or something, do something to it, save it, and let's go back to the Start menu, the Start button, that is. Start tab. Jeez.
I just saved it.
Okay.
It's still saving.
Oh,
Right.
okay, right on.
My machine's a little slow today.
No
There we
problem.
go.
It's probably Zoom. It definitely takes system resources. All right, lock state. The file is locked. All right, when we click the refresh button, could take 30 seconds or a minute to actually show up as Jerry being the author.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to share my screen. Let's see if I can see Jerry's name here. All right, there we go. I'll do my own refresh. Hopefully you can see my screen now.
Yep.
All right, good. So it still says the author is me, but right here it says it's locked by Jerry. I find it takes a little bit of time for the author to actually change. But at the very least, the file is locked, because that's key, right? You don't get this functionality with Microsoft OneDrive or Google Drive, or maybe you do with some other ones, but you don't have the file locking ability with all of them. So one advantage to using BIM 360 docs is the ability to lock files and the ability to automatically load reference files like XREFs and DREFs. You don't have file locking with Microsoft OneDrive necessarily, right? You can open a file locally. Two people can open the same file at the same time, and whoever checks it in last wins, essentially. But with BIM 360 docs, that desktop connector manages that. All right, so Jerry, I'm going to open up this survey file.
Yep.
And I'll make a really quick change to the surface, and then we'll talk a little bit about data shortcuts. While the drawing is opening, I'm going to give you one more advantage for using BIM 360 docs. Oh, Jerry has to buy a beer.
Yeah.
He didn't mute his phone.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, nice. Right. So a lot of us are working from home these days because of COVID, obviously. You may be using a VPN, right? So a VPN is called a virtual private network, and it allows you to connect with your home computer or your work computer at home with the server online. And my question to you, it's a rhetorical question you're not going to be able to answer, but my question to you is, how's that working for you? How is the speed of the VPN, right? When you go to open a file, you're at home sitting in your couch, you got to open a file that happens to live in your office. How long does it take to open that file? How is it working in Civil 3D in that environment? Most users I talk to, even with fast internet connections, indicate that it's a pretty painful thing. It's very slow to work over a VPN with Civil 3D. A huge advantage to using BIM 360 instead of a VPN is the files are local. They are not on a server. Yes, they are in the cloud. So yes, you do have to download the files once. But once they're on your computer, they're on your computer. And Civil 3D works best when files are stored locally. Even your local area network, right? You're sitting in your office working on Civil 3D, working on a file that is stored on the server. This will be faster than that. You might say, well, that's hard to believe because the files are local. Yes, they're local, but Civil 3D going through a network to access files is slower than accessing files locally. So BIM 360 docs stores the files locally, and therefore it's typically a faster. Once you have the file open, it doesn't have to ping the network ever, and so you're going to experience a faster work time. So I'm going to really quickly change this surface. That should have redo rebuild. There we are. I'll save my file and close it. So what's happening in the background? Jerry, if you wouldn't mind taking over again while I'm talking.
I can do that.
Cool. What's happening in the background, I save the file and close it. It saves it on my computer. The desktop connector manages the synchronizing of the files pretty much instantly. The second I save it, it's going to upload it back to the cloud. And then once it's in the cloud, Jerry's machine will be notified that something's changed about it. And so it may or may not show up here yet. But if I can get you to open the alignments file again.
Oh, it is open. I didn't close it.
Oh, good, perfect.
Oh, sorry, I just did. Sorry. I
It's all
thought
right.
I'll open it again.
Sweet.
Then the lock should go out.
Yeah, sometimes it doesn't go up right away,
Right.
but it's locked by you anyway.
Yeah, so it should make a difference.
No. Oh, by the way, since while Jerry's opening this, it can happen for various reasons. A file just keeps its locked status. The BIM 360 administrator can go in and unlock files if they need to. Now, be careful with that. You want to make sure you're unlocking a file that really needs to be unlocked. Because if someone's still working on it and you unlock it, well, now anybody can take over. So our goal here is, while we're working in Civil 3D, we want to know when that surface has been updated. Now, I can see it now. It used to have a boundary, and now it doesn't have a boundary.
Sorry.
So keep
Go
that
back.
file open. I'm gonna make my own change again, because I can see that it's been updated. So bear with me for a second. I'm gonna open that survey file in and keep that file open while I make another change. All right. I guess the first thing that we can notice there is Jerry closed the file and he opened it, and the surface, you may not have seen what was different, but I definitely made a change to the surface boundary. And I can see that that was actually shown on Jerry's drawing. But you're not always going to have to reopen the file. Sometimes I'm working on a surface drawing, Jerry's working on this alignments drawing, and I don't want to have to close the file and reopen it. I want to know when the data shortcuts or the data references have been updated. Now, normally in the bottom right corner of your screen, you get the pop-up in Civil 3D when you're working on your typical, server that says, hey, a reference file has been updated. But when you work on BIM 360, this is just a little bit different. So Jerry, I'm going to get you to click the check reference status button.
Yep. Hang on, I got to go back to mouse.
Okay, cool. What this does is exactly what it says. Have any of the references changed? Have they been updated? XRefs, DRefs. So it goes into the cloud and checks, and no XRefs, but yes, the data reference has been updated. And so when you click OK, then the pop-up comes up and you can click the blue synchronize button, and that's the biggest difference that you're going to see with the data references. You do have to click the check reference status. See, there's a fairly obvious surface change.
Yeah.
Yeah, this tool, this task we don't have to do typically in our server environment. Check reference status. So you do have to do that when you're working with BIM 360. But if you just close the drawing and reopen it, it's just going to load the latest and greatest, which is very nice. So long story short, this whole BIM 360 docs and BIM 360 design thing, it's really just another way of working with files. I'm going to take over my screen again, Jerry.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So instead of working on your server T drive, you're just working in a different place. You're just not going to notice much of a difference, right? I go here to access files, BIM 360, instead of going, file open, although I still can. I can do file open, I can browse to the appropriate place. But you really don't have to, because the folder structure is replicated right here when you go to BIM 360. So you open files from a different area. We have that small sort of workflow change with the data shortcuts where you have to click the check file references button, but only if you have the drawing open. You want to see if something's changed. Other than that, it's pretty much business as usual with this software. Opening and saving files is the same. Creating data shortcuts is the same. Attaching references is the same. A couple of changes to visibility is this. I know that this drawing has been saved in the cloud. That's my indicator that my current drawing is a BIM 360 drawing. That's one. The data shortcuts project folder needs to be stored within your project. So that's the only other sort of small, not even a change, because you have to set your data shortcut working folder when you work with different projects. You have to set the project folder when you're working with different projects. No difference here. It's just your data shortcuts folder has to be in BIM 360 inside the appropriate project. After that, everything else is the same. With the obvious exception of, well, you have to own BIM 360 Docs and BIM 360 Design. You have to have a license for every user. Other than that, it's pretty much the same. Now, what can we do better than what we could do before? Well, file comparison and version control, that's what we can do better. These guys here, we don't really do in Civil 3D. When you save over a file, it's saved over. I can't compare previous versions. And I can't an old version to be current, but I can if I do so within the cloud. So I'm going to hit refresh here. Jerry, can you close the alignment drawing if you haven't done so already?
I can.
Thank you, sir. So while Jerry's closing that, it's going to take a minute or so to update this file as being unlocked. But what I'm going to take a look at is right here. Right now it's version 8. It was last updated by Jerry James. And I can click on the version number and I can see all the different versions up here. Basically every time you save and upload a new file, a new version gets created. And let's say I want to know what's the difference between the latest version and, I don't know, version 2, for example. So I'll click compare versions. It automatically selects the latest version and the previous one, but I don't want to do that. I want to check this one, version 2 versus version 8. So again, what we're doing now typically can't really be done with regular Civil 3D, and so this is definitely a excellent benefit from BIM 360 Docs. I'm going to compare these two versions. I'm going to compare the 2D view as opposed to the 3D view because that's what I want to do, but I certainly can compare the 3D view. There we are. Close this up. Everything that you see in red is the latest version, and the blue stuff is version 2. I can change this a little bit. I'll do the side-by-side method. And I can drag this guy left and right. Right, there's version 8, that's the latest one. That's version 2. And so depending on how you like to look at it, sometimes I like to compare versions this way, and other times I prefer to compare versions with different colors. It just depends on how you want to operate. What if I want to make version 2 the latest version? I want to go back to that version or any other version. Oh, by the way, the lock has come off that drawing now. Didn't take all that long. So pretty much, if I want version 2 to be current, well, I've got a couple options here. I can copy it and maybe place it somewhere else. I could download the source file for various reasons, or I can make this version current. I'm not going to do that, but I wanted to show you when I click the button. I'm going to click cancel, but basically if I click restore, version 2 now goes back to the top of the list, and that's the latest and greatest. Now, what if you do not have Civil 3D, but you've been invited? How much time we got left? We're good for time. What if you don't have Civil 3D and you've been invited to this project by someone who does have Civil 3D? For example, I don't know, the land developer, pardon me. Let me close that survey file myself, actually. I'll get rid of that. I'll rebuild my surface first. There we are. Oops. Right, so you've invited the land developer to this BIM 360 project. So they log in and they see this, and they would love to have a look at this DWG file, but maybe they don't have Civil 3D or even AutoCAD installed. So they're going to call you and say, hey, you know, I want to be able to look at that file. Can you make a PDF for me, or can you do something else for me before I can look at it? And then you'll tell them, well, we don't need that, because all you got to do is click the drawing. That's still refreshing itself. So I'm going to go to the alignment file. So anybody with access to this folder can just click the drawing itself. It opens it up in what Autodesk calls the large model viewer. You can open InfraWorks files, you can open Revit files, Civil 3D files, all with the large model viewer. And then you can navigate. So we didn't synchronize my surface with the alignment file. So I'd have to actually open the alignment file and just refresh the surface and then close it again. That's why it still looks that way. The same thing happens with Civil 3D, even on your server. So anybody without AutoCAD can come in here and take a look at stuff. Zoom in. The performance is shockingly good for an internet plugin, really. You can make measurements. You can mark up. You can turn layers on and off. You can make comments, or you can go into, let's say, a 3D view. Couldn't open, that's interesting. Let's close that. Let's check out the survey file. All right, there we go. There's our 3D surface. And remember, I'm just running this inside Google Chrome. Now, it's a pretty small surface, but the performance is fine. There's no lag whatsoever. I could see the surface there in 3D. Looks sort of a shaded model, depending on how I hold my mouse. And anybody without Civil 3D can do this. Make some measurements, do some markups. The markups themselves don't affect the DWG file. So as long as you've restricted write permissions on the drawing, anybody can come in and have a look at it. When they create markups, they just show up as a BIM 360 layer. They don't show up when you open the drawing or anything in Civil 3D. They're just there when you look at it in BIM 360. And so that's the large model viewer. And so, instead of making PDFs and sending them to everybody, and now you have something that is separate from your workflow, right? If I send you a PDF, you own the PDF now. You mark it up, and you have to send it back to me, and I have to look at it. But if you start marking up files this way, everything's just all together. There's no weird PDFs floating around all over the place. Now, yes, we do need PDFs from time to time, because you can't just invite everybody to your project, although you could. There's workflows. There's going to be a workflow for you creating PDFs. There's going to be a workflow for you just inviting people to your project in order to mark up this way. And that is what you get with BIM 360 Docs and BIM 360 Design that we don't have with typical Civil 3D. So to recap, what are some of the advantages? Well, the ability to modify version control. The ability to invite people to your project to view and mark up the drawing without having to create PDFs. That's an advantage. The speed boost that you're going to get by having the files saved locally on your machine. Running Civil 3D, especially over a wide area network, is very slow. I don't know if you've tried it, but I've worked in an office where the files are located, let's say in Calgary, and I'm working in Vancouver. Sure, when I open the file, it has to copy it over the wide area network. Hopefully you have like a fiber speed, because a big file is going to take a while just to copy over. But even just working in the Civil 3D file, it's going to be slower, especially over a long geographical distance like that. So this is going to give you a massive advantage that way, working in different offices that are spaced geographically. And there's more advantages, which I don't really want to get into today, but basically requests for information, creating transmittals, creating these plans. That's all for another webinar, possibly. So there's definitely a lot more advantages to BIM 360 docs than what I've demonstrated today. That's pretty much all I wanted to talk about. Jerry or Steve, are there any questions that you want to share with the group, or are there any outstanding questions that have not yet been answered?
Well, there's one question that Colin asked, and I tried to answer it, but I'm not 100% sure if I'm 100% on the money here.
Okay.
The question is it possible to import only certain components of a previous version of a drawing into the latest version?
So the version control is just about the DWG. So if version 2 has some stuff that you like, you can open version 2, I suppose, and then grab what you want or delete what you don't want. So basically, I guess the answer is not really. It's about the whole DWG.
Yeah.
So you could theoretically open both drawings together at the same time and work with them together to get yourself a drawing that you like, and then save that. That's the only way I can think of it. So for example, like if version 2 contains an alignment, you just want to bring in that one alignment as a new alignment, you can open version 2 and maybe copy and paste that alignment, or maybe export to XML. That would be the workflow, I think.
Okay, that's more or less what I answered, but that's great.
Okay.
And
Cool.
that's all we have for questions. I'm not sure if anybody else has any questions.
Yeah, it doesn't look like there's any other questions, but if any of the attendees do happen to have any questions after, please feel free to reach out to myself, and I'll pass the question along to Matt or Jerry, and then they'll probably respond and send you sort of the answer. Or if there's a question that you want to see more of a live situation, we'll be able to probably set up a meeting and kind of just walk you through some of the questions that you may have with BIM 360. So I wanted to thank everyone for taking their time to join us on this webinar today. And if there are other components of BIM 360 that you would like to see, feel free to reach out to myself anytime, and we'll go from there.
I believe this session is being recorded, and it should be posted to the SolidCAD YouTube channel.
Correct.
Shortly. Not sure exactly when, but shortly.
Perfect.
Cool. Thank you very much, Steve and Jerry.
Thank you. Thanks
Thanks.
everyone for attending.
Cool. And that's it. I guess we'll see you next time.
Absolutely.
Everyone have a great day. Take care.